If you told me 2 months ago that my whole life would fall apart in one night, I would have laughed at you. But now, here I am, numb, heartbroken, and more alone than I've ever felt. My name? It doesn't matter. What matters is how one decision, one secret, can shatter everything you love, trust, and depend on. This is my story. You see, I never imagined I'd be the one asking for help in an online forum, desperate for advice. But that's exactly where I am now. I never thought the day would come when my own actions would destroy not just my life, but also the lives of my husband, my children, and my family. But here I am, ashamed, remorseful, and carrying a burden I don't wish on anyone. My husband and I had a good life. At least, that's what everyone thought, including me. We were married for nearly 14 years, raising two wonderful kids together. My husband, David, is a strong provider, smart, loyal, funny, someone I fell deeply for when we first met. We had everything a couple could want: love, laughter, and stability. Our boys, Sam and Lucas, aged 9 and 11, meant the world to both of us. If you'd asked me even 2 years ago if I was unhappy in my marriage, I would have said no, absolutely not. David was everything to me. He fulfilled me in every way. And yet, something inside me went terribly wrong. It started almost without warning, like lightning out of a clear sky. There was a new family in our neighborhood, Tyler and his wife, Laura. They were younger than us, friendly, and quickly became part of our little community. Tyler was charming, easy to talk to, maybe a bit too easy, if I'm honest. The spark lit between us at a neighborhood picnic. It was just a look, but something inside me shifted. Looking back, I can't explain why that moment meant so much. It was like being 18 again, nervous and reckless at the same time. Tyler worked at the car dealership where my husband and I were planning to buy a new SUV. We went as a family, and the whole thing felt harmless. David and Tyler hit it off, and Tyler made sure we got a good deal. But the real deal was the secret glances Tyler and I exchanged, each one more electric than the last. My heart pounded like it hadn't in years. A few days later, I had to return to the dealership alone to fix some minor things with our new car. That's when Tyler and I spoke privately for the first time. He came right out and told me he'd been thinking about me since the picnic. I hesitated, but, if I'm being brutally honest, I admitted I felt it too. Something about him pulled me in like gravity, a dangerous, irrational pull. The next morning, our kids were at school, and our spouses were at work. I should have stayed home, but instead, I found myself at Tyler's door. The house was quiet, the air thick with temptation and guilt. We crossed every line. It wasn't love. It was pure adrenaline, forbidden and reckless, and I kept going back. In the 5 months that followed, it happened 3 more times. Never love, always a rush, the shadow of guilt looming behind every thrill. I told myself it was just a phase, that I could compartmentalize, keep the pieces of my life separate. But secrets never stay secrets for long, and on a Thursday morning, it all came crashing down, loud, ugly, and violent. What followed changed everything: the marriage, my friendships, my sense of self, all torn apart in a few moments. And just like that, I was no longer the woman I once was. I became a memory, a ghost in my own home, forced to watch as the life I built slipped through my fingers. But that's just the beginning. Because what happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about loyalty, forgiveness, and whether love can ever truly heal betrayal. Sometimes it's like the worst moments in life sneak up on you, crashing down out of nowhere. But in my case, I watched them unfold in slow motion, a nightmare where I could only stand and stare as everything burned. After that morning at Tyler's house, lying in that tangled mess of sheets and guilt, I realized how far I'd fallen. But the real reckoning still waited for me. Marina, Tyler's wife, had been scheduled for an early work shift, or so we thought. Instead, her mother, of all people, dropped by Tyler's house unexpectedly that day. I didn't even have time to grab my clothes. She burst into the bedroom, eyes wide with shock that quickly twisted into pure rage. What happened next was chaos. Slapping, screaming, nails raking across skin, the feeling of shame so sharp it made me dizzy. Marina's mother called me every hateful word in her vocabulary, yanked at my hair so hard I still remember the burning on my scalp. I was scrambling for my dignity, for my clothes, for any shred of cover, not just for my body, but for my soul. I ran from Tyler's house, half-dressed, humiliated beyond words, racing across backyards like a criminal, praying none of the neighbors would see. I can still feel the sting on my face, the ache in my heart, shame clinging to me like a second skin as I stumbled home, praying the boys wouldn't be there, that I wouldn't have to explain right away. My mind was reeling, spinning through 1,000 scenarios, none with any hope. I spent hours sitting motionless on my living room couch, staring at the walls, biting my nails down to the quick. How do you tell the man you love that you've betrayed him in the worst possible way? I dialed David's number, leaving a message, my voice shaking, pleading that I needed to talk. I texted him too, desperation growing as every minute ticked by with no reply. Then came the knocking, a furious pounding on the front door, shouts echoing through my quiet house. It was Marina and her mother, voices raw with rage and grief, hurling accusations, demanding answers. I couldn't face them. I shrank on the floor, silent, tears streaming down my face as they hammered at the windows and cursed me. By the time they finally left, the house felt colder, emptier. I cried myself to sleep on the couch, startled awake by the rumble of tires in the driveway. I rushed to the bathroom to fix my swollen face, splash water over puffy eyes, and tried to hold myself together for what would come next. I heard the door click open, but instead of seeing David walk in, I watched from behind the curtain as he turned on his heel and walked straight toward Tyler and Marina's place. He was gone for hours. I imagined the worst: fights, confessions, heartbreak played out in the open. When the sun was already low, David finally returned home. I ran to him, arms open, desperate for even a crumb of comfort. He stopped me cold, putting up a hand. My apologies tumbled out, words catching in my throat, but he didn't listen. There was nothing but a hard wall in his eyes. His voice was ice, telling me to pack my things and leave. The ground seemed to drop away. I crumpled to the floor, sobbing, begging him not to do this. He just shook his head and called my mother. My mom arrived within half an hour, sadness etched in her face as she tried to comfort me and apologize to David. She helped me throw clothes into a bag while I wept and pleaded with him not to tell our sons, Sam and Lucas, what I'd done. Not yet. David's reply was short. He'd handle it, just like he always handled everything. With my bags packed and heart in pieces, I walked out of the home we'd made together, knowing my world had just collapsed. The first night at my parents' house was a blur of grief, every minute weighed down with the knowledge that I had done this. I dialed David just to hear his voice, and by some miracle he answered. There was a long silence after my apology, a void stretching between us. When I asked if he hated me, David paused before finally admitting he needed time, that hearing my voice only made him angrier. He wanted me to stay away for a few weeks. My only comfort was a brief call at 9 each evening, a cold allowance for the mother of his children, nothing more. Each night I tried to reach out, to say I love you, but the silence on the other end grew heavier. The second night, something inside him broke. He spoke just 5 words that sent me spinning. I want a divorce now. Panic twisted my insides. I begged for another chance, pleaded with promises I wasn't sure I could ever deliver. But David, always the planner, told me he'd give everything up. Every dollar, every asset, if I would just disappear and let him and the boys move on. My words meant nothing. I barely recognized the person I was, the person I'd turned him into. But in those darkest hours, I came up with a wild plan, a last-ditch effort to save even a scrap of what was left. I made a decision that could change everything for both of us. I wasn't ready to give up. I spent sleepless nights trying to find a way back, searching for hope where there was none. It became clear that David was serious, determined to end the life we'd built together. He was meeting with attorneys, setting everything in motion, moving through heartbreak with a cold precision that terrified me. The thought of losing my family forever, of my boys growing up thinking their mother had been erased, was unbearable. Desperation gave birth to a plan. I made appointments with attorney after attorney, not to contest a divorce, but to craft a post-nuptial agreement so lopsided it bordered on madness. I needed, to show David I'd do anything, give up every comfort, sign away every asset, for just one more chance to prove my love and loyalty. The process was grueling. I explained, over and over, to a parade of lawyers that I wasn't looking to protect myself. I wanted to make an offer so favorable to my husband that it would be insane not to accept. Days blurred together as I worked with a sympathetic lawyer, redrafting the contract until it was crystal clear. Every asset would remain with David if he'd stay married to me for a set time. If I slipped up even once, if there was another betrayal, I would lose everything. No claim on money, no alimony, no child support. To prove my seriousness, I added more. I would find a full-time job, contribute to household expenses, and grant him complete freedom, even to see other women if he wished. It was humiliating to imagine such a future, but I felt it was a small price to pay. Maybe, if I bound myself to this promise, David would see the woman he'd once loved beneath the wreckage. I sent the agreement to him, heart pounding, only days before his lawyers were set to serve me the divorce papers. When David finally read the proposal, he called me for the first real conversation we'd had since everything exploded. For a moment, I heard a trace of the caring, gentle man who used to make me laugh. He was surprised, maybe even touched, by how much I'd offered, how much I was willing to give up just for a second chance. But David wasn't done negotiating. He told me, in his quiet, steady way, that he would agree, with one extra stipulation. There would be no obligation for us to sleep together, no expectation of affection between us, even if we remained under the same roof. The words sliced right through me, final, cold, and somehow worse than any anger he'd shown before. Still, I agreed. What else could I do? I signed, hoping against hope that time could heal what I'd broken, that maybe, with patience, David's heart would thaw and let me in again. So began our second marriage, a strange, stilted partnership defined by legal contracts, awkward silences, and routines that felt like walking on broken glass. This was not the marriage I'd dreamed of or the life I'd pictured for my boys. Instead, it was two adults playing house, sharing space while the wall between us grew higher every day. From the outset, it was painfully clear that things would never be the same. 17.5 months later, here I sit, realizing we aren't really husband and wife anymore. We're two co-parents inhabiting the same address, trading boy schedules, managing logistics. David keeps me at arm's length, never letting me touch him. Sometimes, in a moment of weakness, I try to hug or kiss him before he can pull away. But I see the discomfort in his eyes, and I stop. It isn't just the absence of affection. There's a list of new rules, proof of my shattered trust. I'm required to take monthly at-home STD tests and show David the results. He never goes out with me in public, not even for family gatherings. At Sam and Lucas's sporting events, we take turns accompanying them, never together. On those rare occasions we travel as a family, David books 2 adjoining rooms. He sleeps in one bed, I in the other, the boys' laughter echoing down the corridor between us. Sometimes, during these trips away from the cold familiarity of home, I almost fool myself into thinking we could repair what was broken. These are the moments when we talk about childhood memories, about the boys, about dreams, and for a second, I see the spark of the man I married. But every trip ends, and reality snaps back. David just isn't there for me anymore. I suggested moving, starting over somewhere new, but he refused. Unless a job transfer forces our hand, this is where we're staying, at least until Sam and Lucas finish high school. The boys don't want to leave. Their friends are here, so are David's. But for me, the neighborhood transformed from home to prison. The women I once called friends now barely look at me. I see judgment in their eyes, hear whispers behind closed doors. Even as my sons play with the other kids, including Tyler's children, I remain on an island, tending my garden in the backyard, invisible to everyone. My world has shrunk to the walls of this house. The vibrant life I once lived has faded, replaced by routines and loneliness. Each day a reminder of what I lost, and of what, against all reason, I'm still hoping to win back. Day by day, I moved through a haze, half existing, half punishing myself, as I learned to live with the new version of my life. Some parts, on the surface, looked unchanged. The boys needed breakfast before school, someone had to drive them to soccer, and weeknights still required a home-cooked dinner. But deep down, nothing was the same. David and I became little more than silent partners in the business of raising our sons. Our old bond dissolved into stiff nods and cold, polite exchanges. Meals became a kind of ritual. On weekdays, when David worked late or found an excuse to skip my cooking, it was just me and my boys around the kitchen table. Oddly, those became the best hours of my week, setting out plates, chatting about their homework, laughing over silly stories, wiping sauce from their cheeks, feeling, for a flicker, like I hadn't lost it all. The kitchen, my garden out back, those were the only corners where I could breathe, where I still held a purpose. I taught Sam and Lucas how to plant tomatoes, how to rake the soil, and pull weeds. We created a green patch just for us, a tiny world where, at least for a while, everything seemed simple again. Still, the bigger world pressed in. The other mothers I once met for coffee now walked by with barely a glance. Invitations vanished. Tyler and Marina were separated in less than 8 months after that terrible morning, though Marina still lived just down the street with her kids, their lives eerily untouched in public, even as mine fell apart. My boys, innocent and trusting, continued to play with all the neighborhood children, including Tyler's, unaware of the storm swirling in the grown-up world. The evenings felt endless. David made sure to distance himself. Every night, he'd either retreat to the den or, more often, wander to another father's garage down the block. I'd see the glow of cigars, hear laughter floating on the wind, and sometimes I'd press my face to the window just to hear his voice, even from far away. He still grilled on weekends, his specialty, his domain. The boys ate what he cooked. I made my own meal, pretending it didn't sting. We never spoke about it. He just wouldn't touch what I prepared. Traveling as a family became an odd contradiction, a glimpse of old happiness in strange new rules. Vacations meant 2 rooms, always adjoining, always 2 beds per room. The boys would blast music and jump on their beds in one, while David and I lay yards apart, separated by a gulf of silence. For a flicker, these trips almost felt real. When David would let himself laugh or share old memories of our courtship, I could see shards of the gentleman who once made me feel adored. Sometimes I dared to hope, just for a second, that the cracks might heal. But every time we came home, he slipped instantly back into his shell. I was his housemate, the mother of his kids, nothing more. I tried suggesting we move away, start over where no one knew our past, just us and the boys somewhere fresh. But David was firm. "We stay unless I get transferred," he declared, and that was the end of it. The boys refused too. All their friends were here, all their routines. Why should they have to pay for my mistakes? My own world shrank to the shadows. The friendships I'd cultivated over more than a decade vanished. The women who once called me for coffee shut me out. In their eyes, I was the one who ruined a marriage, who destroyed happy families. Marina's anger still echoed through the neighborhood, and her forgiveness seemed as impossible as a second chance from David. It got so bad that some days I didn't leave the house at all, hiding in my garden or reading by the kitchen window. The backyard became my sanctuary, a small square of sunlight where no one whispered or stared. Sam and Lucas kept me afloat. Afternoon meals together, hands working together in the garden, their easy laughter. These were the moments I clung to. They kept on playing with Tyler's kids, almost as if nothing had changed. David kept up his own routines: work, gym, cigars with friends out on the porch. He returned home, but rarely spoke to me. His distance went beyond just coldness. David refused to be seen with me in public. No family events, no parent-teacher nights, not even side-by-side at soccer games. When the boys played, we alternated who drove them. If we both attended, he stood on the sidelines with the other fathers, pointedly ignoring me. The only time he agreed to share space was on vacations, and then always with physical distance between us. Even small things hurt. He demanded monthly at-home STD screenings. My shame replayed each time I held out the negative result. I told myself he deserved that peace of mind, but every time it eroded my hope a little more. Sometimes at night, when the house was dark, I'd stand in the hallway and listen to laughter drifting down from David's end of the house, wishing I could step back in time. I tried, once in a while, to close the distance. A hug here, a kiss there. But the way he stiffened under my touch told me not to push. Living like this was a kind of slow torture, and I wondered how long I could hold out hope. Was it fair to keep believing that time could heal even a wound this deep? Still, I found myself wanting to earn his forgiveness, desperate for even a shred of affection. I knew what I'd done, the damage I'd caused, but I couldn't let go. I held on with everything I had. Months passed, and our stalemate continued, until, at last, I decided I had to do something drastic. The walls were closing in, memories, regrets, the daily ache of being so close to love and never able to touch it. I chose to move out, if even temporarily, to give both of us some space, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to breathe again. It felt like my last, wild hope, one final gesture to save whatever was left of my marriage, even as I feared it might finally bring the end. Last month, after countless nights spent staring at the ceiling, I finally made the choice. I told David I was moving out, at least for a little while. I needed space, air, the quiet away from echoes of old laughter and newer, sharper silences. With trembling hands, I rented a furnished apartment just a few streets over, packed up my essentials, and left our home that felt haunted by regrets and lost dreams. Oddly, what I feared most wasn't the loneliness. It was the idea that my absence wouldn't even make a ripple. And yet, when I broke the news to David, he paused. I saw something shift in his eyes. A flicker of surprise, maybe even worry. He asked questions he hadn't asked in months. Was I okay? Did I need help moving? Would I take Sam and Lucas? His concern was subtle, but it made me ache with hope. Everything changed, and yet everything was the same. I wasn't far, and I missed my boys fiercely. Their footsteps down the hall, the mess in the kitchen, the routine chaos of family life. There was a bizarre comfort in my little apartment, though. Free of the side glances, of whispered gossip as I walked the neighborhood. The memories clung to our old street like smoke, and away from it, I could finally breathe. The boys came to stay with me several nights a week. After school, I'd pick them up and bring them home, our new place filled with their laughter and stories, just as my empty heart needed. We fell into a rhythm, evenings of board games, pizza, and movie nights on the tiny, sagging couch, mornings thick with syrup and pancakes. Their presence soothed some of the ache, letting me pretend that wounds could really heal with enough small kindnesses stacked up, day after day. David and I grew unexpectedly flexible about the kids' routines. He never once questioned when or how long they'd stay. It was always about the boys' comfort, never about drawing lines. We'd talk, sometimes for long stretches, on the phone about school projects, household bills, or schedules. Slowly, our conversations moved beyond logistics, inching into softer territory. Music from our old college days. Funny stories about work. Childhood memories. I caught myself hoping each call would last just a moment longer, yet there were nights, as I watched streetlights spill across my ceiling, solitary in my own room, when I missed the garden, the familiar creak of our front door, The feeling, even broken, that I belonged somewhere. The pain ebbed and flowed, never really leaving. I knew this was my own making, my punishment for the choices that put this distance between me and the people I loved. Being away from David didn't dull my longing. It made absence itself a living presence in my life. I found myself reaching for the phone, dialing his number just to ask about things that barely mattered. Had the mail come? Did the smoke detector battery finally die? Did he remember to feed the cat? Little things, empty excuses, anything to hear his voice and keep our thread of connection alive. Sometimes, during those calls, we'd find ourselves talking late into the night, about everything and nothing. David seemed lighter in those moments, almost as if the weight between us had shifted now that the walls were not closing in around us. There was the tiniest spark of the old laughter, a pause before hanging up instead of the click of a call ending in cold silence, but I could feel the fragility of it all. The air was always thick with things we couldn't say. I had to remind myself not to read too much into the warmth, not to hope too much that time apart might stitch things back together. Even so, the boys continued to anchor me, Sam with his endless stream of questions, and Lucas with his easy jokes. Seeing them happy, watching them run down the apartment hallways with wild energy, gave me moments of real joy. It was a reminder that, despite everything, I hadn't lost their love. Time marched on. The coldness at home left scars I wore beneath every smile. But the small victories, shared meals, a conversation that lasted a little longer, a quiet concern in David's voice, each one felt like a sliver of redemption. It's strange what you start to hope for when the storm has already done its worst. I hoped for peace, for a day when memories no longer hurt, when maybe, just maybe, David would look at me and see something worth loving again.